Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today we're going to be talking about DaggerHeart again. This will probably be the last video I make on DaggerHeart for a while, but I finally play tested it and I sort of wanted to make a follow-up video to my pros and cons video that I made a little while back and sort of go over if those pros and cons are still pros or cons and other things that I like about the game now that I have more experience with it. So, with all that being said, let's get into it. Before we get started, however, I do want to make a sort of acknowledgement of a mistake I made in the previous video, and that was about the domain classes and how I said there was going to be a lack of replayability because you're able to constantly switch out class abilities. This was not true. So the way it works is you can only have 5 class abilities at once, and once you go past level, I think it's level 4, you would have all 5, so at level 6, you start to put some that you pick in vaults. You can only pick 1 per level up, so when you hit level 10, you only have 11. So realistically, you can't just constantly swap out all of them. You can only swap out between the 11 you picked, which was a mistake of mine, and I acknowledge that. So that con that I initially stated is not a con. It's not a real thing. There will be replayability for all classes because you're not going to constantly pick the same 11 unless those same 11 are really good, but you're not going to be picking those same 11 constantly. So there is replayability for different classes. So I want to start with character creation, and honestly, character creation is one of the most fun aspects of the game. To sit there at a table with all of your friends and sort of make the characters together is a lot of fun. To go through each step of the 14 steps with your players there is really cool and unique because normally, when my group at least makes D&D characters, we're separate. They normally talk to me, the DM, or whoever the DM is going to be, and they make the character sort of with the DM. But in this game, you make it with the other players, which I think is really fun. There's a lot of good stuff that sort of works together, not to mention you kind of have to work together if 2 people end up with the same domains, which in my game, they did. We had a guardian and a warrior, and they both share the blade domain. So we did have to sort of go through it together with both of them and to pick abilities so they didn't overlap, so they didn't pick the same one, which is how we played it. You can play it with multiple of the same card ability being available to everybody, but we played it that there was only 1 of each, and it worked out really well. We were able to sort of work together, make a good character. Everyone got to pick the abilities they want. It was very fun. So I do kind of want to talk about the characters that my players made, because why not? I think it'd be fun. So first up is the guardian of the group known as OK. He's a halfling, ridgeborn, stalwart guardian who I thought was really funny. Just the idea of this little small 3-foot-tall halfling running around being the one taking a bunch of the hits because he's really easy to hit, but he reduces the damage by a literal metric fuck ton. It's like 13 if you look at his character sheet, which I'm showing you right now, which is insane how much damage he's able to reduce. And yeah, I think he was a lot of fun to watch because the idea of this small little thing effectively being the tank was really cool and really interesting. The whole character is about wanting to find a wizard who kidnapped or killed his brother. He's not sure which, and that's his whole goal. He's trying to hunt him down. He has a helmet that belongs to the mage that he's trying to bring to a specific prison, of which he doesn't know where the prison is. So yeah, that is his quest, and I think he is very funny and very interesting, and I can't wait for us to play more with this character. But moving on to the next character. Next up is the warrior of the group, Gorog, the giant seaborn Call of the Slayer warrior, who is, very interesting. His whole backstory is the fact that he was part of the seaside guard in his hometown, or the home region he was from, and he was betrayed by the captain of the guard, and he is now looking for him and sort of looking for the place of luxury that his people always talked about that was a myth on the seas. That is his whole thing. He's trying to find the person who betrayed him, and he's trying to find a place where he can live in luxury on the seas, the place where he belongs. And this is actually where I get to bring up the background questions that sort of formulate or can formulate your backstory, and that is exactly what you're seeing here, what I just described to you about the character, about how the captain of the guard betrayed him, and it feels like a massive betrayal because he was his hero, and he's looking for a myth that from his childhood where travelers can visit and sort of live in pure bliss and luxury. That is where he wants to go and sort of find it. And also the other part of it was who taught him how to fight and why did they stay behind when you left home. And this character was my father, and the reason he stayed behind was he's old, which was really good. I think that is really fun that there's this option on your character sheet where you can answer in 2 different ways. You can actually answer these questions as if you are the character, or you can do it as you're writing the character's sort of description as the player. So you can be like, Gorog stayed behind, or Gorog's father stayed behind because he's old. You can do that. And I like the idea that there's 2 ways you can sort of write these background character questions, and I like that it's right there on the sheet. So you can always sort of refer to it instead of having this massive note thing. Yes, D&D has like the flaws and all that sort of stuff, but I feel like having a separate like sheet, which is what DaggerHeart has, there's 2 sheets for each character. It makes it really nice and really like easy to sort of just look back and refer to your character backstory, which I think is very interesting. And lastly, we have Rigby Sands, the Simia Wanderborn wizard of the group, who used to be a farmer and was herding horses but got drunk, and the horses of the tribe fell off the cliff. He was blamed for it, and now he's trying to redeem himself by finding the legendary horse idol of his people, and that is his whole quest. These characters are really a lot of fun. They're able to sort of, like I said earlier, the background questions really let my players sort of explore ideas, and they had like a path to follow instead of having to come up with something 100% on their own. So I like the way character creation works. The characters that they all made were really fun, and just overall, it was just really interesting to sort of go through every single step with the players at the table and create these characters. So character creation is really badass and really cool, and it allows for the players to be creative and also have a guide if they need to have one. So I thought that was very helpful and very, very good. So now I want to talk about the duality dice. Again, I talked about it before, but I really like the hope and fear system. It is really interesting for the way that it works. When you roll it, you have hope dice and a fear dice, and if it's higher on the fear, it means you either succeed or fail with fear, depending on if you beat the DC, or if you roll with hope, like the hope is higher, it means you fail or succeed with hope. And depending on how it works, if you fail with fear or if you fail with hope, you either, give me, the DM, a fear point, or you give yourself a hope point, but you still don't get to achieve the thing you were going after. Or if you succeed, you get to succeed with fear, but I still get a fear point. And then if you roll with hope and succeed with it, you get to have your hope point and you succeed with what you were trying to do. I very much like this, and the rolling, when you were sort of taking that time to look and feel like, oh shit, which one did I get? And then the fear, and then the actual like fear and worry that puts in the players is actually kind of interesting, because that's something else that I can use later in my disposal when I go to fight them with any monsters that I choose to fight them with. So there's a lot of fun with this whole system, with the idea of, oh shit, my role has more of a consequence now if I fail, rather than just me not being able to succeed at what I want to do. It gives the DM something, or the GM something, that they can use on me later, which I think is a very interesting concept. Also, the adverse of that, if you succeed with hope, you get something that you can use later, or very soon if you have an ability that lets you add hope to a roll or something, which I thought was very good and very interesting. I liked how it all worked. Overall, very much a big fan of the fear and hope system, much like I thought I would be beforehand. Before I play tested it, I said I liked it, but I really like it afterwards. And to sort of back that up, the idea that there's a constantly renewable resource for both the players and the GM or DM is really, really cool to me. The idea that this hope thing, which you can only hold 5 on to if you're a player, is the way that you activate certain abilities for your class, or you can activate tag team attacks, which, by the way, is so fucking cool. Tag team attacks are badass. But the idea that there's this constantly recycling of hope, and then like when you roll with it and you get more hope, it's really cool to watch them sort of get this resource, figure out how they're going to use it, because one turn ago they didn't have that resource. So now it completely changes how they're going to look at things, and it's very interesting. The adverse is very true as well. As a GM, you get to sort of watch them roll fear, and now you have something extra that you can use against them in the turns to come, which I think is very interesting and very cool, and frankly is like one of the most interesting parts of this game. The idea that there's this constantly like renewable resource being put into both hands of the DM and the players is super cool. So one of the things I wanted to touch on based on my last video was the HP system. I wasn't a big fan of like it being blocks and like the major, severe, and minor damage thresholds. Personally, I realistically still am not a big fan of it. I personally prefer just having a health pool. I think you could keep the armor system, which I think works really, really well. I think you could keep that and still have a health pool and just reduce the damage you take by the armor, which would make armor a lot more valuable, because now you also have evasion and armor, which I think works really well. Evasion being the thing that you're trying to beat to sort of make the hit, and then armor being what reduces the damage, I think is really cool. And I think would still work really well if you got rid of the damage threshold and you got rid of like the whole HP block system. I think you can keep stress. I really like the idea of stress, but instead of it being like you lose a block of HP, you lose X amount of HP. I think that would work really well. So frankly, I don't like how HP looks in this game. I would personally get rid of the the thresholds of damage and the HP blocks, and just make it a hit point pool. But I would keep evasion and armor. I think the armor system is really interesting and really cool. The fact that you can like choose whether or not to reduce the damage that you're taking and then like sort of lose an armor slot, I think is really interesting. But I'm not a big fan of the hit points and how it works. I feel like it doesn't visually look appealing to me. And I know that's going to sound weird for a lot of people, but that's just me. I would prefer to see the health pool that I have going down as opposed to the, checking off hit point sort of blocks. I think the blocks work really well for maybe enemies, but if you're going to have it for one, you're going to have it for the other. So I feel like a health pool would still look visually better, and you can keep the other things around, like evasion and armor, like I mentioned before. But that's just me personally. This is not going to change in the game, and I know that's not going to change, but that's just my personal opinion on it. So now I'm going to talk about combat a little bit here because it is something that needs to be talked about. When we wrapped up the game, I asked what their least favorite part was and what their favorite part was. And 2 of the players said that their least favorite part of DaggerHeart was the combat. And there's a couple reasons for that. One was initiative. They weren't a big fan of it. There was a bit of confusion created by how it sort of works, when they can go, when each other haven't gone yet, or if it's fair for them to do repeated moves if no one speaks up. So eventually they just ended up abandoning how initiative works, and they created their own initiative orders, and they followed it like that, where they went in like a clockwise order around the table for them to be able to sort of go in actions like that. And I thought that worked out really well. They created their own initiative, which defeats the purpose of how initiative works in this game, but the entire table sort of agreed initiative wasn't the way we like initiative. And that's our personal table. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but personally it worked out really well, and it actually sped up combat tremendously once we did that. So there was less confusion, less, oh, go ahead, oh no, you go ahead. That stuff didn't happen once they sort of created their own initiative count, which I thought was really cool that they were able to do that for themselves and sort of do what they wanted to do with this game and how it works. The next thing about combat that I kind of want to talk about is the pendulum. There's a pendulum within this combat system that is extraordinarily dangerous, and I feel like this game is going to have a lot, and I mean a lot, of TPKs. And the reason I say that is because of the action tracker. So the way that the action tracker works is once a player takes an action, they place an action token on the action tracker, and that is the resource the DM has to attack with once a player fails. So the way combat works is the players get to go, they attack until one of them fail. Once one of them fails, the DM gets to go. And the DM gets to use as many action tokens as they have available to them and they want to use to fight back. Say you have like 3 bears, the players have made like quite a few attacks now, say there's about 6 tokens up. You can then use 3 of those tokens to make it 1 attack each with the bears. That's how it works. However, there's a mild problem with this, and it comes with the fear system from before. And this is something that I sort of noticed. Let's say, as a DM, I save up a metric fuck ton. Instead of me attacking with each bear every turn, I only attack with 1. So I've now saved up like 12 tokens because there is no limit to how many tokens there are. This is the problem. The fact that there's no limit. Let's say I've saved up 12 and I have full fear, which means I have 10 fear. I have full fear and I have 12 action tokens. I can wait for them to fail. Use as many attacks as my bears have, so I'll use 3, right? Then my players get to go, and the minute that player either finishes their attack and they succeed or they fail, I get to go again because I have fear, and I can spend 2 fear points to make my monsters or my turn appear again. So now I can use 3 more and attack again. And then the next player goes, succeed or fail, I use fear points again to attack again. I have now hit 9 times in this sort of time frame. They have hit me once, maybe twice. At best, I've hit them as many times as I possibly can within these next couple of turns. And this is sort of the problem that this lack of initiative sort of carries over with. And the fact that this action token or action tracker has no limit to how many tokens can be placed onto it. And I think it shows that there needs to be a lack of, or not a lack of, there needs to be a true measure of restraint from the DM to not absolutely obliterate their players. And it's kind of unfortunate because this is the reason my players thought combat was sort of lacking compared to the rest of the game. They thought that the fact that there is a pendulum, they even noticed it. They didn't have me point it out. They noticed that there was a pendulum of their own, that I could just absolutely destroy them if I didn't, show restraint. If I just let loose, I could probably have killed each of them within the first combat that we did. So the combat is fun. There is something there with the combat, but I think there needs to be a limit to how many tokens can be placed on the tracker, and honestly, that would fix a lot. If you put limits on the tracker, and then if you put a bit of an initiative roll in there, the combat would be infinitely better. And I don't think it's bad. I think it's really good, the combat, because when they did hit, they had a lot of fun with it, and they also had a lot of fun of figuring out how much armor slots they want to spend and how much damage would be reduced by it. They liked it. They did enjoy that part of the combat. They liked combat in general. But those two things, the initiative sort of causing confusion and the action tracker being so lopsided, really did put a bit of a hamper on combat for my players and myself. So yeah, I very much enjoy it. I want to point that out. The combat was fun. The combat we did was fun, but the action tracker presents a problem. And I don't know if that's going to be something that will be fixed or not. They are doing a live stream later tonight, sort of going over updates, so I'm curious to see what updates they give. I hope a limit to the action tokens that I can track as a DM is one of them, because it is a dangerous resource for me to have. So what you guys are looking at right now is the experience, or the experiences, of the character OK, the Guardian Halfling I mentioned before. So I want to talk about experiences again. And realistically, I am still in the exact same boat that I was in before, for many reasons. One, if you don't know what I meant by I'm in the exact same boat I was before, I do not like experiences. I think these are way too vague, and yes, the game mentions you can't use them in combat, or they are supposed to be specific, but you're always going to try to find wordings that will create multiple scenarios that this can be worked in. And one of the reasons I don't like it is because there's going to be someone who's more creative with figuring out how to do that. There's going to be one person who's going to figure out a phrase, a wording, or something like that that will create a sort of power vacuum, or just a power scale that is so much crazier than everyone else. There's going to be someone who comes up with something where they are able to apply it with way more, and I desperately hate this. I think they should just come up with a 3-page spread of a bunch of varying different types of experiences that you want to come up with, or that sort of fit the idea that you're going with, and they're very specific. I can't stress this enough. This is way too vague. And yes, the game says it's not supposed to be too vague, but it still ends up being super vague, and it's not. I just don't think it works. They need to just have an entire sheet or an entire page or 3 pages and just dedicating them each to the word or the phrase that it is, and then an explanation as to where it would fit. I think that would fix this problem tremendously, because it is a problem. There is definitely an issue with the experiences. That being said, I vented this to my players, and they came up with some really good ones. Not to mention, they didn't just listen to me when I was sort of talking about it. They did try to find a way to sort of use it to make multiple sort of scenarios fit really well. And they came up with a few. So this one that you're looking at, like I mentioned before, was OK, one of the Guardian Halfling. And he came up with Mage Hunter, which was a sort of general term for being able to track or figure out, you're tracking wizards, or you're trying to be able to suss out who a wizard is, or you're trying to figure out if someone's used magic in the area, what type of magic in the area. And I thought that was very good. It was specifically based around magic or mages and trying to figure out who a mage was or anything like that. Then there's Butcher, which was very specific again as well, which was more so about being able to track wildlife in the woods for hunting and being able to cut them up really well to make nice packaged meat. And I thought that was interesting as well. Climber is the most obvious one. It's for climbing trees, but the reason both the Halfling and the Simia have the exact same thing for experience known as Climber is because they're both really small, and they climb up onto the shoulders of the giant ally they have, and that's how they traverse. The 3 of them traverse together on his shoulders, or the two smaller ones are on the shoulders of the giant as he walks through towns and stuff like that. So Climber, for them to be able to safely climb down off him, or to be able to reach up and grab a tree branch and sort of walk around like that, was perfect. And I do think there is an amazing scenario with these experiences. I just hate how vague they are, personally. And I'm going to never get off this hill of how much I just think there's going to be one person at the table who is the min-maxer of the table, which I think is a negative thing, by the way. There is some room for debate on that in my head, but I truly think that playing just to make like the most optimized character is super boring. But there is going to be someone who comes up with an experience that can apply fucking everywhere. And I just know it's going to happen, and I hate it. It's going to cause arguments at the table, which this did, by the way. It caused an argument, not these ones specifically, but just the whole concept did end up causing an argument about when shit should be applied and stuff like that, and I fucking despise it. So, yeah, I still don't like experiences. There is room for improvement on them. There is room. Like, my players did make good ones that didn't infuriate me. So, there is definitely room. And this is where I think the players have to show restraint, right? Much like how in the action tracker system, the DM has to show restraint. This is where the players have to show restraint. And I think that's a problem. To have to show restraint, to not be abusing an ability or an experience is bad to me. But that's just me personally. So another thing I want to talk about when it comes to experience is how many of them you get and the rate at which you get them. So at level 1, you get 2. One is a +2 and one is a +1. And this is worrisome because obviously the one you're going to try to make like the best is the one that's +2. You're going to try to make that one the one that applies to most things. But a +1 is still really good in this game. So the issue comes in once you hit level 2 and you get a third one. That is way too soon. Even my players thought that was ridiculous. The fact that you go from level 1 to level 2 and suddenly you have 3 of these little things, and now that's basically it. That's wraps, dude. By the time you have 3 of them, you can likely apply them to a million different scenarios, and that is a massive problem. Let's not forget, at level 5, only 2 levels later, you get another one. And then again, at level 8, you get another one. Yes, the level progression is going to be a lot different for this game because it's only up to level 10. But, that is still insanely quick. My players agreed that level 3 would be a good place to get another experience because that's a little bit more time that you've spent adventuring, which I think makes a lot more sense. Then we thought level 5 kind of worked well enough. But if you're going to move it up to like level 6, you'd have to move level 8, the one at level 8 to level 9. And I honestly think 3, 6, and 9 works way better than 2, 5, and 8. Because that spreads it out a bit more between each level. Well, it doesn't really spread it out too much. But it means like you're spending more time in adventuring before you get these experiences. Because, listen, by the time you're level 5, you have fucking 4 of these things. And that is guaranteed to be able to cover the spread of all of your abilities. Guarantee you're going to be able to come up with as many as you can think of to cover as much as you can. And there's way too many experiences. If it were me, I would cut that shit down to 3. But that's just because I hate it. But a reasonable person would say 4. 5 is too many. 5 is way too many. So I do want to mention that leveling up feels kind of good in this game. It's not like a guarantee to increase like your HP or anything like that. You get to, at level 2, take an initial experience, but then you get to pick, I believe it's 2 things from the available list, which I thought was really cool. It means like you're going to be able to mix and match a lot of stuff when you go to play this class again later, or when you go to level up in a different class, and each class has unique ways of leveling up within the 2 to 4, the 5 to 7, and the 8 to 10 sort of areas, which I think is cool, or each tier is really interesting and really cool. And they have differing ways between each class. And I think that's really cool instead of it just being, the same thing where you get like an ability at this level, or you get like a ability increase at this level, or you get to pick a feat or whatever. And what's really nice is that not everyone is going to get like HP increases or armor class increases or anything like that. It's going to be very different and very varied between each player, which I think is very good. And it will really make and fix my initial problem was I was worried that you would just pick like one thing every time and then there's no replayability. But this truly proves that I was completely wrong on that front, that there would be no replayability for classes, because you won't be able to pick everything within the tier of 2 to 4. You're going to pick a lot, but you're not going to pick everything. And you'll definitely be able to make different and interesting characters each time you were to play Guardian, or each time you were to play wizard, or something like that. So I definitely think there is a lot of room for customization when you level up, and I think that's very good. So I do want to talk about the ancestors a little bit. I like all of the art for all of them. I like that there are so many like unique and interesting ways they've sort of spun things. Fairy is like my most favorite thing in this game because of the idea that they're not like small little like elf or humanoid creatures. They are fucking insects, and I think that is so badass. That is so cool. I very much like the whole aesthetic with them and how there's multiple ways you can like pick a different bug. You can just be like a typical like mosquito creature, or you can be like I think they're rhino beetles. Like you can do that. Like there's so many different like insects that you can sort of take from and become that. Much like Simia, you can be a bunch of like a variety of different monkeys. However, there is one, in my opinion, that stands above the rest, and that's not actually true. They don't stand higher than everyone else. They're much smaller, and that is halfling. Halflings are insane to me. So, the fact that they give, at the beginning of every session, they give the entire party an extra hope point, which is ridiculous, in my opinion. Already very strong. You're supposed to start with 2, and they ended up just getting 3 at the start of the first session in the entirety we ever played. On top of that, they always reroll, you may always reroll a 1 on your hope die. If you do, you take the new roll instead. That is gross. That is so gross. And yes, it's only a 1. Dude, it doesn't matter. It happened 5 times in my game where my halfling rerolled the fucking 1. It was wild. And then when he rerolled the 1, because you add the 2 dice together to like make a hit, he basically never missed. The Guardian never missed, and he hits like a motherfucking truck. So the fact that this was just such a good ability that he had, and it's a racial ability or an ancestry ability, that's disgusting. I love the races in these games. They need to make that less broken, because the amount of times that happened in our game was wild. And I said 5, that is a minimum 5. Craziness, because not only does it work on attack rolls, it also works on just general ability checks. So like when they went to go jump over something, if they roll a 1, they got to re-roll it. Only the 1 time, but that's basically advantage. Because not only is it the hope die, which, you know, you have to re-roll, that's the die you'd get to get a hope point. So if you roll lower with if you roll a 1 and you're obviously going to roll better with the fear, but that fear is only a 6, you re-roll the hope die and now it's a 12, you have now gone from giving me a fear point to getting yourself a successful hope point, which is just really good. It's just so good and so powerful that you're able to roll this. It's advantage in like a D&D sense of advantage, not a DaggerHeart advantage, which is just a D6. That is crazy. That is wild. That is so good. And it's just brutal to me as a DM. So there you have it, my final thoughts on DaggerHeart for now. Eventually we will play this game again, me and my friends, and we will sort of go up more in levels and figure out more stuff, and eventually we'll learn what like abilities are way better than other abilities, etc., etc. So realistically, I think this game has a lot going for it. I very much enjoy a lot of it. Yes, there were things that I commented on that I didn't like before I played the game, and I don't like after, and those are things that will not be taken away from the game, which is a little bit unfortunate for me. But overall, I think this is a very good game. And yes, I did take forever explaining the things that I don't like about the game, but I need more time to explain those than the positives, because I feel like a lot of people will be on board with the positives already. But anyway, I think this is a good game. There's a lot to it. I very much hope for its future that it is a big competitor for D&D, which is I think the goal for this game, which is to be a competitor for it. And I think that there's definitely a possibility it does. Do I think it's going to reach the same levels of popularity that like 5e D&D did? Absolutely not. 5e D&D was a monster of its time, and I don't think that this will come close. I think we're actually kind of like on a downward spiral for most tabletop RPGs right now, but this could definitely reinvigorate a lot of people and bring some more people back in. Who knows? Overall, I do think that this is a good game. So if the narrative seems negative in this video, because there are 2 5-minute spans where I just rant about negative things, sorry. I do enjoy this game. It was a lot of fun for us to play. Creating a character was amazing, and it was a lot of fun. I didn't even get to talk about like how there's like built-in connections, which is really cool, which I'll talk about it now. The idea that there's like built-in connections on your character sheet, which make it so like your characters are aware of each other before the game starts, which is really fun, because the awkwardness of like some games that you end up playing in D&D, right, where you're like doing like a one shot, or you're starting like a new campaign, and the DM, you know, you make a bunch of characters by yourself, and then a DM goes, okay, you guys have all been working together for a while, introduce yourselves to each other. That doesn't exist with this game because of those connections, and I think that's a brilliant idea. The fact that you're supposed to build these characters with other people is brilliant, and I think it's one of the best parts of this game. The idea that you're going to be sitting around with a table, spending an hour to 2 hours like my players did, and make these characters is awesome. So I very much love the character creation. After 25 hours of character creation, I can now play Baldur's Gate 3. But otherwise, I very much enjoy this game. There are some problems I have with it, but, you know, I'll either get used to them or I won't, and I'll complain about them forever, much like I do with some things in D&D. But who cares? I will see you guys on Friday for the recap of episode 91 of Campaign 3 of Critical Role. Until then, peace.